My name is Mia, and I'm 28 years old. Standing here in this dusty old bakery with flour coating my trembling hands, I can hardly believe 6 months have passed since my entire world collapsed. The wedding day that should have been perfect with Jake, my partner of 5 wonderful years, turned into something I never saw coming. This abandoned bakery in Montana, my Aunt Dorothy's forgotten business, became my unexpected sanctuary when I had nowhere else to turn. Before I continue my story, I'd love to know where you're watching from today. If you've ever felt like your whole world was crumbling beneath your feet, please hit that like button and subscribe to hear how sometimes the worst moments lead to the most beautiful transformations. The Grandview Hotel in Seattle had never looked more magnificent than it did that morning. 200 guests were arriving, including my entire marketing team from the agency where I'd worked for 6 years. My wedding dress, an $8,000 masterpiece that Margaret, my future mother-in-law, had insisted on buying, hung pristinely in the bridal suite. The March sunshine streamed through the windows as my parents, Robert and Susan, who had flown in from Chicago 3 days early, fussed over every tiny detail. I should have paid attention to the warning signs that entire week before the wedding. Jake had been unusually tense, constantly checking his phone and jumping whenever it buzzed. He'd blamed it on work stress at his architecture firm, claiming a major project deadline was looming. Tom, his best friend since college, and our head groomsman kept avoiding eye contact whenever I asked about the bachelor party. Even Jessica, Jake's younger sister, acted strangely distant during the rehearsal dinner, barely touching her food and excusing herself early. The morning preparations started beautifully. My bridesmaids gathered in the suite at 7, champagne flowing as the hair and makeup team worked their magic. Lauren, my best friend of 10 years and maid of honor, seemed nervous, but I attributed it to her perfectionist nature. She kept checking her phone and stepping out to take calls, claiming her boss at the law firm needed urgent updates on a case. I was too caught up in the excitement to question why she looked pale beneath her carefully applied foundation. 30 minutes before the ceremony was scheduled to begin, I heard raised voices from Jake's room down the hall. Tom's voice carried through the door, urgent and pleading. Something about doing the right thing and not going through with something. My stomach tightened as I approached, still in my full wedding attire, the train of my dress trailing behind me. The door was slightly ajar, and what I saw through that gap destroyed everything I thought I knew about my life. Jake was holding Lauren against the wall, his hands tangled in her hair, kissing her with a passion I hadn't seen from him in months. Her bridesmaid dress was pushed up and his cummerbund was undone. But what made me gasp wasn't just the kissing. It was Lauren's hand pressed against her stomach in that protective way, and Jake's whispered words that followed. 3 more hours and we can stop pretending. After the honeymoon, I'll tell her about the baby. About us. The door creaked as I pushed it open. They jumped apart like guilty teenagers, but the damage was already visible. Lauren's lipstick smeared across Jake's mouth. The positive pregnancy test on the dresser. Tom standing in the corner, looking like he wanted to disappear into the wallpaper. How long? My voice came out steadier than I felt. Jake's face went white. Mia, let me explain. 2 years, Lauren answered for him, her chin raised defiantly. We've been together 2 years. I'm 3 months pregnant. The room spun. 2 years meant every anniversary dinner, every weekend trip, every time Jake said he was working late. Or Lauren claimed she had a girls' night they had been together. My best friend and my fiancé had been playing me for a fool for 730 days. Did everyone know? I looked at Tom, who couldn't meet my eyes. Margaret chose that moment to walk in, taking in the scene with one sharp glance. Instead of shock or anger at her son, she turned to me with cold calculation. Well, now that you know, perhaps we can handle this like adults. Jake made a mistake, but Lauren is carrying my grandchild. After the ceremony, we'll work out an arrangement. An arrangement. Like my humiliation was a business deal to be negotiated. Jake's mother had known. She had smiled at me during the rehearsal dinner, toasted to our happiness, all while knowing her son had impregnated my best friend. You knew? I stared at Margaret in disbelief. I've known for a month. Jake needed guidance, and I provided it. The wedding was already paid for. Your parents traveled from Chicago. Canceling would have been embarrassing for everyone. Embarrassing. As if going through with a sham marriage wouldn't have been worse. I looked at Jake, searching for the man I thought I'd loved. He stood there, not even trying to deny anything, just looking inconvenienced by the timing of my discovery. "Mia, please," Jake finally spoke. "We can work this out. People have arrangements. You love our life together." "I loved an illusion," I said, my voice cracking. "I loved a man who doesn't exist." Lauren stepped forward, placing her hand possessively on Jake's arm. "He was never really yours, Mia. You were just too blind to see it. Always working late, always tired. I gave him what you couldn't." Something inside me snapped. The careful control I'd maintained shattered like the fairy tale I'd been living. I grabbed the pregnancy test from the dresser and stormed out of the room, my wedding dress catching on the doorframe and tearing with a sound that matched my heart. The grand ballroom was full of guests mingling with champagne glasses, waiting for the ceremony to begin. I burst through the double doors, mascara streaming down my face, holding the pregnancy test high above my head. The string quartet stopped mid-song. 200 faces turned to stare at the bride, who looked like she'd been through a hurricane. "The wedding is off," I announced, my voice carrying to every corner of the room. "The groom has been sleeping with the maid of honor for 2 years, and she's pregnant with his child." The silence that followed was deafening. Then chaos erupted. Phones appeared, cameras flashed, and the whispers started like wildfire. My parents rushed forward, my mother's face white with shock, while my father's turned red with rage. He started toward the doors where Jake had just appeared, but my mother held him back. "Mia, sweetheart." My mother tried to reach for me, but I backed away. Jake stumbled into the room with Lauren behind him, both looking disheveled. Margaret followed, her composure finally cracking as she saw the crowd recording everything on their phones. This would be all over social media within minutes. The perfect society wedding had become a public scandal. Daniel, Jake's older brother, approached me carefully. "Mia, please. Think about this. You're emotional. Jake made a mistake, but throwing away 5 years, you two can get counseling. Work through this." "Work through what?" I laughed bitterly. "The 2-year affair, the baby, the fact that his mother knew and still let me walk down this aisle." Lauren had started crying, playing the victim perfectly. Some of Jake's relatives surrounded her protectively as if she was the wronged party. Several of my supposed friends were whispering behind their hands, and I caught fragments of their conversation. "Always thought something was off. Should have handled this privately. So dramatic." My bridesmaid Sarah at least looked genuinely appalled. She walked up to Lauren and threw her champagne in her face. "You're disgusting," she said simply, then came to stand beside me. "Mia, you're making a scene," Margaret hissed, finally finding her voice. "Think of your reputation, your career. No one will want to work with someone so unstable." "Unstable?" I looked at her in amazement. "Your son cheated on me for 2 years with my best friend, got her pregnant, planned to marry me anyway, and I'm the unstable one." Jake finally spoke up, his architect's mind trying to construct a solution. "Mia, let's talk privately. We can figure this out. The baby doesn't change how I feel about you." "No," I said firmly. "We're done. All of this is done." I walked through the crowd, my torn dress dragging behind me. Some guests offered sympathy, others judgment, most just stared in shock. My cousin Amy tried to stop me, suggesting I might regret this later, but I pushed past her. In the bridal suite, I grabbed my purse and car keys, not even bothering to change out of the ruined dress. The parking garage felt like a tomb. I sat in my car for a moment, hands shaking too badly to put the key in the ignition. My phone was already exploding with notifications. Texts, calls, social media tags. Someone had live-streamed my announcement. I was trending on Twitter. My humiliation had gone viral in real time. I turned off my phone and started driving. No destination in mind, just away. Away from Seattle, from Jake, from the life I thought I'd built. The wedding dress made driving difficult. The train bunched around my feet, but I didn't care. I drove through the night, stopping only for gas, still in my gown, ignoring the stares of other travelers. 18 hours later, exhausted and running on fumes both literally and figuratively, I found myself in Whitefish, Montana. I hadn't consciously decided to come here, but my subconscious had guided me to the one person who might understand. Aunt Dorothy, my father's older sister, the family's black sheep who'd never married and lived alone in this small mountain town. As I pulled up to her modest farmhouse at dawn, still wearing the destroyed wedding dress, I realized I had 97 missed calls. I didn't check who they were from. I didn't care. My old life had ended in that hotel room, and I had no idea what came next. Aunt Dorothy opened her door before I could knock, as if she'd been expecting me. At 65, she stood tall and rigid, her gray hair pulled into the same severe bun she'd worn my entire life. She took one look at me in my ruined wedding dress, mascara-streaked face, and tangled hair, and simply stepped aside to let me in. "Coffee?" she asked, as if nieces showed up at her door in destroyed wedding gowns every day. "Aunt Dorothy, I started to explain, but she held up her hand. "I saw the video. Your cousin Amy sent it to me an hour ago. The internet works even in Montana." She poured 2 cups of black coffee from an ancient percolator. "Drink this, then shower, then we'll talk." After I'd cleaned up and borrowed some of Dorothy's clothes, we sat on her porch overlooking the mountains. The silence stretched between us, but it wasn't uncomfortable. Dorothy had never been one for unnecessary words. "I'm leaving for Europe tomorrow," she said finally. 6-month art tour I've been planning for 3 years. Non-refundable tickets. My heart sank. I'd driven all this way and she was leaving. "I understand. I'll find somewhere else." "You'll stay here," she continued, but then added something unexpected. "Not in the house, though. I've got it rented through Airbnb for the next 6 months. 3 different families already booked and paid." "Then where?" I asked, confused. She pointed down the dirt road to a building I hadn't noticed in years. "The bakery. It's been closed for 5 years, but the electricity and water still work. Has a small room in the back with a bed. It's dusty and needs work, but it's private." "The bakery?" "But it's been abandoned. Why would you want me to stay there instead of canceling one Airbnb reservation?" Dorothy looked at me with eyes that held decades of secrets. "Pain needs space to breathe, Mia. You can't heal in someone else's life. You need to build your own. The bakery is empty, waiting, like you need to be for a while." It seemed cruel sending me to an abandoned building when I was at my lowest. But something in Dorothy's expression stopped me from arguing. She went inside and returned with an envelope and a key ring. $2,000 cash, she said, pressing them into my hands. "That's all I can spare with my trip. There's a grocery store in town, Basics, to get you started. The bakery has everything you need to survive, nothing you don't need. Sometimes that's exactly what a person requires." "Why are you doing this?" I asked. "Because 40 years ago, someone did something similar for me. Not the same story as yours, but similar enough." She stood, indicating our conversation was over. "I fly out at noon tomorrow. When I come back in 6 months, I plan to sell the bakery. Been meaning to for years. What happens between now and then is up to you." She walked me to the bakery as the sun set. The building was worse than I remembered. Paint peeling like dead skin windows, cracked and dirty, the cheerful Dorothy's Delight sign hanging by one chain. Inside, dust covered everything in a thick layer. The display cases were empty and rusted, the floor tiles cracked. The industrial oven and mixers sat silent like ancient monuments. "The apartment's through there." Dorothy pointed to a door marked private. It led to a small studio with a single bed, tiny bathroom, and kitchenette. Everything was dated but functional. "Cleaning supplies are under the sink. Grocery store delivers if you call. Don't expect visitors. People in town mind their own business." Aunt Dorothy. I started wanting to thank her or ask why she was really doing this, but she was already heading to the door. 6 months, Mia. You have 6 months to figure out who you are when you're not trying to be what everyone else expects." She paused at the threshold. "Oh, and check the 3rd drawer under the counter. Might find something useful." Then she was gone, leaving me alone in an abandoned bakery in a town where I knew no one with $2,000 and a broken heart. I sat on the dusty floor and finally let myself cry. Not the pretty tears of a jilted bride, but ugly body-shaking sobs that echoed off the empty walls. I cried until I had nothing left, then lay on the filthy floor staring at the ceiling, wondering how I'd gone from bride-to-be to whatever this was. That night I slept in my clothes on the bare mattress, too exhausted to even look for sheets. My dreams were full of Jake's lies, Lauren's betrayal, and Margaret's cold calculation. I woke every hour forgetting where I was reaching for a fiancé who was never really mine. The first week passed in a blur of tears and rage. I barely ate, surviving on crackers and canned soup from the grocery delivery. 10 pounds fell off my already slim frame. Every surface I cleaned revealed another layer of dirt underneath, as if the bakery's neglect was infinite. At night I dreamed of Jake and Lauren together, their betrayal playing on repeat in my mind. By the second week, basic survival instinct kicked in. I couldn't live on soup forever, and the bakery needed serious work if I was going to survive 6 months here. I ventured to the grocery store, keeping my head down, but in a town of 3,000 people, a newcomer didn't go unnoticed. "You're Dorothy's niece," the elderly cashier stated rather than asked. "Heard you were staying at the old bakery." I just nodded, paid for my groceries, and fled. But the next day there was a knock at the bakery door. An old man stood there with a toolbox, wearing overalls that had seen better decades. "Bill Morrison," he introduced himself, age spots covering his 72-year-old hands. "Known your aunt for 40 years. Heard you might need help with the plumbing. No charge. Dorothy helped my wife through her cancer treatments. Never could repay that debt." I wanted to refuse to maintain my isolation, but the bathroom sink had been dripping all night. Bill fixed it in 20 minutes, then sat at the dusty counter and told me stories about the bakery's golden age. 30 years ago, this place was the heart of Whitefish," he said, running his hand along the counter. "Dorothy made the best cinnamon rolls in 3 states. Line out the door every Saturday morning. Wedding cakes booked a year in advance." "What happened?" I asked, genuinely curious. "Same thing that happens to all of us. Life. Dorothy had her heart broken, threw herself into the bakery. Then one day she just stopped, locked the door, and never opened it again. We all thought she'd sell, but she held on to it, like she was waiting for something. During the 3rd week, while deep cleaning behind the ovens, I found the drawer Dorothy had mentioned. Inside was a metal box, rusty but intact. It contained dozens of handwritten recipe cards in Dorothy's precise script, each one dated and annotated. But there was more. Letters yellow with age tied with a faded ribbon. The letters were love letters from a man named Richard, dated 40 years ago. They traced a romance from passionate beginning to devastating end. The final letter was dated 1 week before what would have been Dorothy's wedding day. Richard had fallen in love with Dorothy's best friend. He was sorry, but he couldn't live a lie. Sound familiar? At the bottom of the box was a single recipe card, different from the others. "Redemption cake," it read. The date was 6 months after Richard's last letter. The notes in the margin read, "The cake that saved me. The first thing I baked when I remembered who I was, when I stopped letting his betrayal define me." I studied that recipe like it held the secrets of the universe. It was complex, requiring techniques I didn't know, ingredients I'd have to special order. But something about it called to me. If Dorothy could bake her way back to herself, maybe I could too. My first attempt was a disaster. The cake fell in the middle, the frosting separated, and it tasted like sweetened cardboard. The second attempt burned. The third wouldn't rise. But each failure taught me something. I found YouTube tutorials, ordered professional baking books, and kept trying. By week 4, something shifted. I woke up thinking about flour types instead of Jake. My hands stopped shaking when I measured ingredients. The familiar rhythm of mixing, folding, and kneading became meditative. On my 15th attempt, I pulled a perfect redemption cake from the oven. It was golden tall, and when I tasted it, I understood why Dorothy had named it as she did. It tasted like hope. That afternoon, Bill stopped by with his wife Mary, a gentle woman who walked with a cane but smiled like sunshine. I offered them slices of the cake, my first attempt at sharing something I'd created. "This is incredible," Mary said, her eyes widening. "Bill, this is just like Dorothy's cakes from the old days." "Better," Bill declared, taking a second slice. "This is something special." Word spread as word does in small towns. By the end of the week, I had neighbors stopping by curious about the smells coming from the supposedly abandoned bakery. I started making extra leaving plates on the counter for anyone who wandered in. No money exchanged, just tentative connections forming through shared sugar and flour. The second month marked a turning point. Mary from the grocery store became my first regular visitor, bringing her 8-year-old daughter Sophie every afternoon after school. Sophie had her mother's warm brown eyes, but a sadness that seemed too heavy for a child. Mary was a single mother, her husband having left when Sophie was 3. He said being a father wasn't what he expected. Mary told me one afternoon, while Sophie drew pictures at a corner table. Just walked out one day and never came back. Sophie thinks it's her fault. I looked at the little girl carefully coloring within the lines, trying so hard to be perfect, and saw myself at that age. Always trying to be good enough and never understanding that sometimes people leave because of their own brokenness, not ours. "Sophie," I called out, "want to help me decorate some cupcakes?" Her face lit up like Christmas morning. Soon she was covered in frosting, laughing, as she created increasingly elaborate designs. It became our routine. Every afternoon, Sophie would help me bake while Mary sat at the counter drinking coffee and talking about everything and nothing. Frank, a Vietnam veteran who lived 2 streets over, started coming by in the mornings. He'd lost his wife the previous year and couldn't stand the silence of his empty house. He helped me repair the broken tables, fix the leaky roof, and paint over the water stains. In exchange, I kept him supplied with fresh bread and someone to talk to about his wife Helen. 52 years we were married, he'd say, sanding down a table surface. She made me promise to keep living after she was gone, but I don't know how to do that without her. "You're doing it right now," I told him. "You're here helping me, sharing her story. That's living." Linda, a retired French teacher, discovered I was attempting croissants and nearly had a heart attack at my technique. She took over my kitchen for 3 days, teaching me proper lamination, the importance of butter temperature, and the patience required for perfect layers. Her husband had died 5 years ago, and she'd been drifting ever since. "Teaching you makes me feel useful again," she admitted, showing me how to shape pain au chocolat. Then there was Tommy, a 19-year-old with autism who walked by the bakery every day at exactly 3:15. One day I invited him in and discovered his incredible talent for decorating. His attention to detail was extraordinary, creating intricate patterns that looked like lace made of icing. His mother cried when she saw his work. "No one's ever seen his potential before," she said, hugging me. "Everyone just sees his diagnosis." I hired Tommy part-time, paying him from my dwindling savings. He organized my decorating supplies with military precision and created a system for inventory I never could have designed. The bakery started to feel less like a hiding place and more like something alive. But peace is fragile when you're rebuilding. One evening in the 3rd month, I was closing up when a familiar car pulled up outside. Jake stepped out looking thinner, older, wearing the same expression he'd had when he'd forgotten our anniversary 2 years ago. Now I wondered if he'd really forgotten or if he'd been with Lauren. "How did you find me?" I asked, not opening the door. "Your mom told me. Mia, please, we need to talk." "We have nothing to talk about. Lauren lost the baby," he said, as if that changed everything. "She blames me. We're not together anymore. It was a mistake, all of it. You're the one I want to marry." I studied him through the glass door, this man I'd planned to spend my life with. He looked desperate, but not sorry. Not really. He looked like someone who'd gambled and lost and wanted his safety net back. "I'm not your consolation prize, Jake. That's not what you are. Mia, we had 5 good years. One mistake shouldn't erase that. 2 years of lies isn't one mistake. It's 730 choices to betray me. And you would have kept lying if I hadn't caught you." Your mom thinks you should come home. He tried another angle. She's worried about you. Living in some abandoned bakery in Montana, this isn't you. You don't know who I am, I realized as I said it. You never did. You knew the version of me who tried to be perfect for you, who worked late to afford the lifestyle you wanted, who ignored her instincts when you came home smelling like another woman's perfume. That Mia is dead. So what you're going to stay here baking cookies in Nowheresville? You had a career, a life. I have a life now. It's just not one that includes you. He tried for another hour, cycling through guilt, anger, promises, and threats. Margaret had apparently told everyone I'd had a breakdown, that I was unstable, that when I came to my senses, Jake would graciously take me back. The narrative was already written in Seattle. I was the crazy ex who overreacted. Leave, I said finally, and don't come back. He left, but not before saying, you'll regret this. When you're alone at 40, you'll wish you'd forgiven me. That night I baked until dawn. Bread cakes, cookies, anything to keep my hands busy and my mind from replaying his words. Sophie found me the next morning asleep on flour sacks in the storage room. She covered me with her little jacket and sat guard until her mother arrived. The community had noticed Jake's visit. Small-town eyes miss nothing. But instead of gossip or judgment, they circled around me like a protective shield. Bill started doing morning rounds to check the locks. Frank taught me basic self-defense. Linda brought me tea and sat with me when the shaking started. Tommy organized a phone tree in case I needed help. You're one of us now, Mary said simply. We take care of our own. A week later, Sarah, the food blogger, stumbled into my bakery by accident. She'd been driving through Montana researching small-town eateries when her car broke down. While waiting for repairs, she found my bakery. She ordered a slice of redemption cake and coffee, pulled out her laptop, and started typing furiously. This is extraordinary, she said after the third bite. The texture, the flavors, the story behind it. Do you know what you have here? A small-town bakery that barely breaks even. You have authenticity. This isn't just food. It's healing in cake form. May I write about this place? I hesitated. Publicity meant exposure, possibly. Jake finding me again. But looking around at Tommy carefully piping roses, Sophie doing homework at her usual table, and Frank fixing a wobbly chair, I realized I wasn't hiding anymore. I was building. Yes, I said. Tell the story. Sarah's blog post went viral within days. The Bakery of Second Chances, she'd titled it, weaving together the story of the abandoned bakery, the jilted bride who'd rebuilt herself, and the community that had formed around healing and flour. She'd photographed the redemption cake, Tommy's incredible decorating work, and Sophie's crayon drawings that now decorated one entire wall. Orders started coming in from across the state. Then from neighboring states. People wanted to taste the cake that had supposedly saved someone. They wanted to be part of the story. My little bakery that had been surviving on donations and goodwill suddenly had paying customers driving hours for a slice of cake and a moment of hope. I had to make a decision. Stay small and intimate, or grow and risk losing what made the bakery special. The answer came from Tommy, who'd created a detailed business plan with expansion models and profit projections during his off hours. We hire locals, he said, showing me his charts. Single parents who need flexible hours. Seniors who want purpose. Teens who need first jobs. We become what Whitefish needs. By month 4, I'd hired 3 employees. Janet, a 55-year-old, whose husband had left her for his secretary, ran the register with military efficiency and maternal warmth. Carlos, a young father working nights to support his family, became my bread specialist. Emma, fresh out of high school and unsure about college, discovered she had a gift for pastry. The bakery had transformed from abandoned building to bustling business. We opened at 6 for the before-work crowd, stayed busy through lunch, and became an after-school haven for kids like Sophie. I instituted Pay It Forward Fridays, where customers could buy an extra meal for someone who couldn't afford one. The board was always full of pending meals and always empty by closing. Month 5 brought unexpected challenges and joys. A chain coffee shop tried to buy the building, offering 10 times what it was worth. The mayor himself came to persuade me, talking about progress and economic growth. But progress isn't always about money. Sometimes it's about Tommy gaining confidence to look customers in the eye. It's about Sophie writing a school essay about her hero and choosing me. It's about Frank learning to smile again while teaching Carlos his wife's bread recipe. It was also when Marcus walked in. He was 35, the local veterinarian with kind eyes and gentle hands that came from years of calming frightened animals. He ordered black coffee and a plain croissant, sat in the corner reading, and left a $20 tip for a $5 order. He came back the next day and the next, always sitting in the same corner, always over-tipping. "You know the coffee isn't worth $20, I finally said. "The coffee's good," he smiled. "But I'm really tipping for the atmosphere. This place feels like hope." He started bringing his laptop, working on veterinary articles between appointments. Sometimes he'd help carry heavy flour sacks or fix a temperamental mixer. He never pushed, never asked personal questions, just existed in my space with calm steadiness. One evening, a cat appeared at the bakery door, thin and crying. Marcus happened to be there, staying late to help me with inventory. He examined the cat with professional gentleness. "She's pregnant," he announced. "Malnourished but fixable. She needs a home. I can't take care of a cat. I can barely take care of myself. Sometimes taking care of something else is how we learn to care for ourselves again," he said, not looking at me. I named the cat Dorothy Jr. She had her kittens in a box behind the counter 3 weeks later. Sophie claimed naming rights for all 4 kittens: Hope, Faith, Joy, and Bob. Bob. Because every family needs a Bob, according to 8-year-old logic. Marcus and I grew closer, slowly, carefully. He told me about losing his wife to cancer 3 years ago, how he'd thrown himself into work to avoid the empty house. I told him about Jake, about the humiliation and betrayal. Neither of us was looking for romance. We were just 2 broken people finding comfort in shared silence and the smell of baking bread. "I don't know if I can trust anyone again," I admitted one evening as we watched Dorothy Jr. nurse her kittens. "Trust isn't about other people," Marcus said. "It's about trusting yourself to survive if they disappoint you. You've already proven you can do that." The 5th month also brought a call from my mother. She'd been calling weekly, but I'd only recently started answering. The Seattle gossip mill had been vicious, she reported. Jake was dating someone new, a 22-year-old intern at his firm. Lauren had moved to Portland, her reputation in ruins. Margaret was telling everyone I'd had a mental breakdown and abandoned my responsibilities. "Let them talk," I said, surprising myself with my indifference. "I'm happy, Mom." "Are you really?" "In that tiny town, working in a bakery, you had such a promising career." "I have a promising life. There's a difference." She visited the next week, flying into Whitefish, expecting to find me living in squalor. Instead, she found a thriving bakery, a community that had adopted me and her daughter, laughing again. She spent 3 days working the counter, watching Sophie teach her grandmother to frost cupcakes, listening to Frank's war stories, and seeing Marcus look at me like I was precious. "I was wrong," she admitted before leaving. "This is exactly where you need to be." As month 6 approached, I started preparing for Dorothy's return. The bakery books were balanced and profitable. The building had been completely renovated using the profits. The walls held photos of every regular customer, Sophie's drawings, and a framed copy of Sarah's blog post. The display cases were full, the kitchen hummed with efficiency, and Tommy had been promoted to head decorator with a salary that made his mother cry with gratitude. But more importantly, I'd prepared myself. I was no longer the desperate woman who'd arrived in a torn wedding dress. I was a business owner, a community member, someone's hero, Marcus's, maybe something more. I was Mia, just Mia, and that was enough. The morning Dorothy was due to return, I baked her original redemption cake recipe, the one that had started everything. The bakery was full of regulars when her rental car pulled up outside. She stood at the door for a long moment, taking in the transformed space. The new paint, the repaired sign now reading, Mia's Mountain Miracles. The crowd of customers, Tommy training a new hire, Sophie doing homework while her mother worked the register. Dorothy walked in slowly, her eyes scanning every detail. The professional kitchen equipment I'd invested in. The photo wall, including a restored picture of her from the bakery's original glory days. The menu board featuring her recipes alongside my new creations. She stopped at the counter where Marcus was helping me plate the lunch special, his hand briefly touching mine in passing comfort. Then she saw the redemption cake in the place of honor, a small placard beside it reading, "Dorothy's original recipe. The cake that saves us all." For the first time in my memory, my stern, composed aunt began to cry. Dorothy stood frozen in the doorway as tears streamed down her weathered face. The entire bakery fell silent, even Sophie putting down her crayons to watch. I moved toward my aunt, but she held up her hand, needing a moment to process what she was seeing. "I thought I was coming back to sell an empty building," she finally said, her voice thick with emotion. "I thought I'd find you gone, moved on to something else." "This is my something else," I said simply. She walked to the photo wall, touching the restored picture of herself from 40 years ago, young and smiling behind this very counter. Next to it hung photos of me with the regular customers, Tommy receiving his Employee of the Month certificate, Sophie's first decorating attempt, Frank and Bill fixing the roof, Linda teaching her French pastry techniques, and Marcus helping with inventory, looking at me when he thought no one was watching. "You brought it back to life," Dorothy whispered. "No, you gave it new life. Better life." Bill stepped forward from his corner table. "Dorothy, your niece saved this town's heart. The bakery's just the building. She brought us together when we were all falling apart separately. She hired my Tommy," his mother added, squeezing her son's shoulder. "Saw his potential when everyone else saw his limitations. He's training others now, teaching skills no one knew he had." Sophie tugged on Dorothy's coat. "Miss Mia makes the sad go away with cake. And she lets me draw on the walls and taught me that broken things can be beautiful if you put them together right." Dorothy knelt down to Sophie's level. "She taught you that, did she?" "Yes, and she makes my mom smile again. Mom didn't smile for a really long time after Daddy left." Mary blushed but nodded. "Your niece created more than a bakery, Dorothy. She created a sanctuary." Dorothy stood and walked to the kitchen where the redemption cake waited. She cut herself a slice, took one bite, and closed her eyes. "You found the recipe." "I found more than that. I found the letters too. I understand now why you put me in the bakery instead of the house. It wasn't cruelty. It was wisdom. I knew you'd either run back to Seattle within a week, or you'd discover what I discovered 40 years ago. That sometimes being broken is just the beginning of becoming whole. But you did something I never did. You let people in while you healed. I isolated myself, baked alone, served customers, but never connected. You built a family." "We built it together," I corrected, gesturing to everyone. "Every person here contributed something essential." Marcus stepped forward, then extending his hand to Dorothy. "Marcus Williams. I'm the local vet, and I'm in love with your niece. Thought you should know my intentions are honorable." The directness of his declaration stunned everyone, including me. We'd been dancing around our feelings for weeks, neither brave enough to voice what was growing between us. Dorothy studied him with her sharp eyes, then smiled. "At least this one's honest," she said. "Better than Richard ever was." She turned to address the bakery. "I came back planning to sell this place. Had a developer interested in turning it into condos. But I see now it's already become what it was meant to be." She pulled legal papers from her bag. "I had these drawn up in Paris, hoping I'd need them. Transfer of ownership papers. The bakery is yours, Mia. Free and clear." I stared at the papers. "Dorothy, I can't accept this. It's worth too much. It's worth exactly what you've made it worth. Before you came, it was just an abandoned building full of bitter memories. Now it's alive again, better than it ever was in my time. This isn't charity. It's justice. The bakery belongs to someone who understands its true purpose, which is redemption, second chances, sometimes third or fourth chances. the place where broken people come to remember they're still whole where it matters. As I signed the papers, the bakery erupted in celebration. Frank popped a bottle of champagne he'd been saving since Helen died. Linda started singing French celebration songs. Tommy meticulously piped, "Congratulations, Mia," on a fresh cake with perfect precision. Sophie drew a picture of the bakery with hearts all around it. In the midst of the celebration, my phone rang. It was my mother calling from Seattle with news. Jake's new girlfriend had left him for his business partner. Lauren had tried to come back but found Jake with another woman. Margaret's society friends had started avoiding her after the wedding scandal. The life I'd thought I'd lost had imploded entirely without me there to witness it. "How do you feel about that?" Mom asked carefully. I looked around the bakery at my new life. Frank teaching Carlos a card game, Linda helping Emma with croissant technique, Tommy showing a customer his portfolio of cake designs, Sophie curled up with Dorothy Jr. and her kittens, Marcus beside me, solid and sure, his hand finding mine. "I feel grateful," I said honestly. "If Jake hadn't betrayed me, I'd never have found this. I'd have spent my whole life trying to be someone I wasn't, never knowing who I really was." "So you forgive him?" "No, but I thank him. His betrayal set me free." That evening after the bakery closed, Dorothy and I sat in the kitchen sharing the rest of the redemption cake. She told me about her travels, how she'd visited all the places Richard had promised to take her. She'd seen the Eiffel Tower, the Colosseum, the canals of Venice, all alone but not lonely. "I spent 40 years angry," she admitted. "But somewhere in Rome, standing in the Sistine Chapel, I realized Richard's betrayal had given me something precious. The freedom to live life on my own terms. No compromises, no pretending, just authenticity." "Do you ever wonder what would have happened if he'd married you?" "I'd have spent 40 years trying to keep a man who didn't want to be kept. Instead, I spent 40 years becoming someone I actually liked. You've done the same thing in 6 months that took me decades. I had better teachers. You this town, this bakery." Dorothy stood to leave, then turned back. "That young vet Marcus. He's nothing like Jake." "How can you tell?" "Jake looked at you like a possession. Marcus looks at you like a privilege. There's a difference." 3 weeks later, I stood in the bakery at dawn preparing for another day. Dorothy had moved into a smaller house near the bakery, becoming our official morning shift baker. She'd rediscovered her love for the craft, but this time with joy instead of desperation. Tommy had started teaching baking classes for other adults with autism, turning the evening bakery into a learning center. Mary managed the business side, having quit the grocery store for better hours and purpose. Marcus arrived with coffee from his apartment, a new morning tradition. We'd been taking things slow, both too scarred to rush. But slow was different from uncertain. Every shared sunrise, every casual touch, every look across the crowded bakery built something solid between us. "I love you," he said suddenly. Apropos of nothing, standing there in the morning light with flour dust dancing between us. "I love you too," I replied, surprising myself with how easily the words came. Not the desperate, anxious love I'd felt for Jake, always worried about losing him. This was calm certainty, like recognizing home. 6 months later, we married in the bakery, surrounded by the people who'd helped rebuild me. No 200 guests, no $8,000 dress, no pretense. Just Sophie as flower girl, throwing flour instead of petals. Tommy's perfectly decorated wedding cake. Dorothy officiating with an online ordination and a reception that fed anyone in Whitefish who wanted to celebrate love triumphing over betrayal. Jake had been wrong. I wasn't alone at 40, or 35, or 30. I was surrounded by chosen family, authentic love, and a purpose bigger than any corporate career. The bakery thrived, becoming a destination for people seeking their own redemption stories. We hired more broken people looking for second chances, expanded to the building next door, and started a program teaching baking skills to women leaving difficult situations. But the true measure of success wasn't in profit margins or expansion. It was in Sophie, now 13, teaching other kids that different doesn't mean less than. It was in Tommy, who went from organizing supplies to running his own decorating business. It was in Frank, who found purpose after loss by becoming our unofficial grandfather. It was in Dorothy, who at 70 had found peace with her past and joy in her present. It was in me, standing in a bakery that had once been abandoned, now full of life and possibility. The girl who'd run from Seattle in a torn wedding dress was gone. In her place stood a woman who understood that sometimes the worst thing that happens to you becomes the best thing that could have happened for you. The redemption cake remained our signature item, but I'd added my own creation to the menu: the Phoenix Tart. A pastry that deliberately broke while baking, then was filled with gold-colored cream, the cracks becoming part of its beauty, like the Japanese art of kintsugi, celebrating the broken places rather than hiding them. People often asked if I ever heard from Jake or Lauren. I didn't, and I didn't seek information about them. That chapter was closed not with bitterness but with finality. They'd played their role in my story by forcing me to write a new one. I hoped they found their own redemption, their own second chances, but their journey was no longer connected to mine. Looking back, I understood what Dorothy had known when she'd refused me the comfortable house and sent me to the abandoned bakery. Healing doesn't happen in comfort. It happens in the spaces where we're forced to rebuild from nothing, where we discover that we're stronger than we believed, more capable than we imagined, and worthy of love that doesn't require us to be anything but ourselves. Every morning I still stand in the bakery at dawn, hands covered in flour, surrounded by the controlled chaos of a life I chose rather than one I fell into. Marcus brings coffee. Dorothy starts the ovens. Sophie does homework at her table before school. Tommy arranges the display cases with artistic precision, and the town begins another day. Sometimes tourists come, drawn by the story of the bakery that saves people. They take pictures, buy cake, and leave with a piece of the story. But the real magic isn't in the viral blog posts or the featured segments on food networks. It's in the daily act of choosing to show up, to create something beautiful from broken pieces, to feed people's bodies and souls with equal measure. The wedding that had humiliated me, the betrayal that had shattered me, the escape that had seemed like running away, had all led me here. To this moment, this life, this person I'd become. Not perfect, still bearing scars, but whole in ways I'd never been when I was trying to be someone else's version of perfect. The abandoned bakery had taught me the most important lesson of my life. Sometimes the best thing you can do is stop trying to fix what's broken and instead build something entirely new from the pieces. And sometimes, just sometimes, what you build turns out to be exactly what you were meant to create all along. As I write this, Dorothy's redemption cake is in the oven, the same recipe she created 40 years ago in her own moment of despair. But now it represents something different. Not just survival, not just recovery, but transformation. The alchemy of turning pain into purpose, betrayal into blessing, endings into beginnings. That's the real recipe, the one that can't be written on a card or measured in cups. It's the understanding that every ending is also an opening, every loss, a chance to find something better, every betrayal, an invitation to become who you really are when you stop pretending to be who others expect. The bakery is full now, as I finish writing the lunch rush, beginning with familiar chaos. Marcus catches my eye from across the room and smiles. Dorothy and Linda argue about proper croissant technique. Tommy teaches a new hire his decorating methods. Sophie, almost a teenager, now helps her mother at the register. Frank holds court at his corner table, telling stories to anyone who'll listen. This is my life now. Not the one I'd planned, not the one I'd thought I wanted, but the one I needed. Built on the ashes of humiliation, mortared with tears and flour, decorated with the love of people who saw my broken pieces and helped me reshape them into something beautiful. And to think it all started with the worst day of my life. Or maybe, looking back with the clarity that only time provides, it started with the best day of my life. The day I was freed to become who I was always meant to be. The day my real story began. Thank you for joining me on this journey. If my story resonated with you, if you've ever had to rebuild from nothing, if you've ever discovered that your worst day led to your best life, I'd love to hear about it in the comments below. What was your phoenix moment? How did you find beauty in your broken places? Please remember to like this video if it touched your heart. Subscribe to hear more stories of triumph over adversity, and share it with anyone who might need to hear that their current ending could be their greatest beginning. Sometimes the most powerful thing we can do is let others know they're not alone in their journey from broken to beautiful. Until next time, remember that every sunrise is a chance to begin again, every recipe an opportunity to create something new, and every ending a doorway to something better. May you find your own bakery, your own redemption, your own second chance at a life that's authentically, unapologetically, beautifully yours.